Hey guys, quick video today. We're going to be changing the oil in a 2015 Ford F150 with the 5-liter V8 engine. This is the after-work garage. So we're going to start out by warming up the truck just a little bit. It's about 35 degrees out right now, and cold oil doesn't flow that well. And so by warming up the engine just a little bit, it's going to get the oil out faster, and it's going to get more of the old dirty oil out so we can put new fresh stuff in. So the truck's warmed up here. As you can see, it has 41,489 miles on it, and the oil life is at 8%. Now the quoted service interval on oil in this vehicle is 10,000 miles, and I generally don't like to bring it out that far, especially because I use this truck to tow a lot. But I haven't gotten around to changing the oil until now. Looking in the service manual, we see that the 5-liter engine has an oil capacity of 7.7 quarts. Now that's going to be completely dry, and since we're never going to drain all of the oil out of the engine, we're going to be looking at replacing a little bit less than that. But what we'll do is keep an eye on the oil level as we're filling it back up to make sure we don't overfill it or underfill it. Similarly, the service manual recommends 5W20 oil. Ford is going to recommend Motocraft because Motocraft is the Ford brand. But any good oil will do, as long as it's changed frequently. What is good oil then? Well, today I'm using Mobil 1 full synthetic 5W20. But really, with the way oil technology is, if you buy oil from a reputable brand like Pennzoil or Valvoline or Castrol, you really can't go wrong unless you're using the wrong weight oil or trying to extend your oil change intervals out too far. Now, synthetic blend versus standard oil, that just has to do with how the oil's made. So standard oil is derived from the oil that they pump out of the ground, it's refined, and additives are added to it, and then that is how they make standard oil. Full synthetic oil, they start with small molecules of hydrocarbons, and then they actually synthesize the oil by putting those together into oil molecules of a certain chain length. So all the molecules are going to be a certain chain length, which means that the oil doesn't break down as quickly. There's not as many undesirable hydrocarbons in there. And so in general, full synthetics can last a little bit longer in your engine without turning into sludge and breaking down and losing their lubricating properties. Oil in an engine has three functions. It lubricates primarily. It also cools the engine parts, like the bottoms of the pistons, the rotating assemblies where you can't really get coolant to. Oil's going to squirt up there, splash up there, and cool those parts. In this engine, for example, they even have oil squirters that squirt a jet of oil up to the underside of the piston to help cool it. Third, oil cleans the engine. So when you have exhaust gases that make their way around the piston rings down into the crankcase, instead of having all that soot and gunk and stuff build up in your engine, oil helps suspend it and make sure it doesn't settle places and stick to things. So I'm not particularly partial to a certain brand of oil. I think most oils work well, and while today we're using Mobil 1, I've definitely used Castrol and Valvoline as well as Pennzoil. And even in a pinch, use Walmart oil, which really isn't all that bad. But if I were putting this in the truck, I would probably want to shorten the oil change interval and change out the oil maybe a little sooner next time. But there is a lot of debate. It is a hot topic. There's a lot of opinions out there, a lot of which have valid reasons behind them. As far as I'm concerned, use a quality oil and change it regularly, and you probably won't have any problems. So the first thing we're going to do is jack up the truck. Next, we're going to open the hood and loosen the oil cap, or take it off. Hey there, welcome under the truck. Alright, so we have our drain bolt right here, and I have a drain pan right underneath, ready to catch some things. And that's going to be a 15 mil socket on there. Okay, I almost had a disaster there. I forgot to open the drain hole in this oil pan. and 7 quarts of oil was about to spill all over my floor. So I reached in there and quick and got it. But it does give us a chance to look at the oil, which is still very hot, but it doesn't look terrible. Actually looks pretty good. It's definitely old, and I'm glad I'm changing it, but there's no stray metal particles in there, and nothing looks weird to me. The oil's just about drained out, and before I put the drain plug back in, I just want to show you that the drain plug has a magnet on the bottom of it. So when you take it out, if there's any metal shavings stuck to it, that's not a great sign. Now, engines do produce some metal shavings normally, so if there's just a little bit on there, don't worry. But if there's a whole clump and wad, then you might have issues. Tighten it back up. Don't over tighten these, because if you strip the threads out, it's a sad day. So there's also a crush washer under this drain plug that every manual ever will tell you to replace every time you change your oil. I've never replaced them unless they look really smashed down and like they're not going to do their job. That said, just because I haven't had any problems doesn't mean that it's best practice. Right here with the oil filter. Now, Ford has provided these nice spillways so that the oil doesn't drop straight onto this cross member, and funneled it into the oil pan, which I have waiting down here. In general, oil filters shouldn't be on too tight, so you should be able to undo them by hand. That said, if you need to use an oil filter wrench, use it for taking the oil filter off only. There's no need for an oil filter to be on so tight that it's smashed on there. Again, you just want to prevent it from accidentally unscrewing while you're driving, which would be bad for obvious reasons. So we have our new oil filter here, and we'll just compare it to the old one, and they look the same. Oil filter brands are one of those things like oil that is hotly debated, and I stand by going with a reputable brand. So we're going to fill the oil filter up, because this is a space that has a filter membrane in there. We're going to let the air bubble out of it, but we don't want the engine to have to pump this full of oil before the engine actually gets any oil. Alright, let's put it back on. Again, oil filters don't need to be very tight, so I'm finger tightening it right now to the point where it compresses the gasket against the block, and that's it. I'm leaving it. Oil fill on this truck sits in the valve cover on the right hand bank of cylinders and sits right over, if you notice, one of the timing chains that drives the overhead camshaft. We know it takes about 7 quarts, so I'm going to go ahead and put the remainder of that bottle in and this full 5 quarts in. Riveting content, I know. So we're over at the other side of the engine. Oil dipsticks here. We'll pull this out. Give it a wipe off. Now the oil level is right here in the middle of the cross. See that dry spot there? But the bottom hole's covered. But we're not quite done. We're going to turn the car on for a sec, let it run, and then come back and check the level. So we're going to let the car run for just a second, and the purpose of this is to get the oil filled into all those passages so that we can check the oil level, and then we're going to also go underneath and make sure there's no leaks. So if you look now, our oil level is a little below where we want it, below that first dot. It's because as we turn the car on, oil passages got filled with oil, and it got pumped out of the sump. So you can see clearly there the line The demarcation is right there. So we gotta add a little more. If you can see that, we are right about there. And I am happy with that. Very important step right here. Putting the oil cap back on. I didn't do this one time, and instead I left it sitting right here. It took me 2 days to realize that my truck had a big pool of oil all over it. And because that cam chain spins around under there, it was slinging oil everywhere. That's part of why it's so dirty in here. So the last thing we have to do is reset the oil life. So I'm gonna scroll down here. Engine oil still says 8%. Hold OK to reset oil life. Hold OK. We're back at 100. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time on the After Work Garage.